I cannot believe that this calculator can actually draw graphs. Hello everyone, hello, welcome back to another video on the mancubs channel, and today we're going to be having a look at this calculator right here, the Casio fx-6300G, and we're going to be looking at its most unique feature, the ability to graph despite how it looks. So we'll get straight into that, but before that, if you're thinking of a modern graphing calculator, you might think of something like the Casio CG100, or in this case I've got the GraphMath Plus, something that looks about this size, has got a nice color screen like this, and has got these kind of features. Or you might think of something like this. We've got the HP Prime here, one of the most powerful calculators on the market at the moment. It's just a real great calculator and can draw graphs, obviously, and it's got touchscreen. But did you know that over 30 years ago now, Casio made this little calculator, the 6300G, and this thing can actually draw graphs. Look at the size of it compared to a modern graphing calculator nowadays. I mean, if we just look at the actual dimensions, it's tiny, isn't it? Even compared to something like my trusty 991EX, it's smaller than that. And this can't even draw graphs. Even if we look at the thinness of this calculator, you can see it's so incredibly thin, and that's with the case on as well. If I take the case out, look how thin it is, and then I'm actually going to get my HP Prime here, one of the thinnest calculators as well. They're basically the same thinness or thickness, and this was done over 30 years ago, which is insane. But we're actually going to have a look at how they managed to do this. So, I got this calculator probably around a year ago now. I got it on eBay, and I got it for £7. Great deal. These aren't actually too uncommon to find, and they're pretty cheap second hand. I just went for the cheap one. This one's been a bit vandalized. Thank you, Robert Newell, for your calculator. And it's got this signature Casio 80s/90s look with all of the modes written down here. We've got the screen, the shift alpha, this kind of buttons for the navigation, all that kind of stuff. So now let's actually get into looking at how it graphs. So as we can see, press AC to turn it on, which actually is a little bit uncommon because this one, for example, has a little slider on the side to turn it on, which I think is so cool. And there's kind of two types of graphing on this calculator. So let's say I want to just draw a basic sine curve. What I want to do is I want to press the graph button right here, and then after pressing that button, I'm going to press just sine. I don't even need to put X, I just put sine, and it acts like a preset. So if I press execute now, it draws the graph. Look how cool that is. If I just bring this a little bit closer to the camera, as you can see, the pixel area, if I tilt it a bit, you can see the pixel area only covers this bit here, and then this bit along the bottom here, and then this bit here has just got sort of preset pixels, if that makes sense, sort of like the top bar of a Casio FX901EX or a 901CW like you have at the moment. There we go. So that's very cool, and as modern calculators, graphing calculators that is, you can trace. So I press trace, and then I'm all the way at the end, minus 6.28, that's minus 2 pi. So if you want to draw more than one graph, what you have to do is not use the preset. So let's look at the other way of graphing on this calculator, not using the preset. So what we have to do is graph and then actually put the x's in. So if I put sine x here, not sine space, sine x, there we go, we get a sine x graph. I did it earlier, just it will draw slower when you do it for the first time. And then if I want to draw another one, let's say I want to draw cos. If I draw cos x, it should draw it on top like that. So if you're using the presets, you can only draw one at a time. But if you're using an x in there, so then you can do graph transformation and that kind of stuff, then you can draw more than one. Can we draw more than two? Let's see. If I press graph and then I put tan x, for example, can we get the trio? Yes, we can. You can see tan x draws on there, and you can see it's looking a very a little bit messy at the moment, and that's what you get with a screen with this kind of pixel density. And for fun, why don't we draw it on some of the most hated series of calculators at the moment, the CW series. We're not going to memory, we're going to graph and table. Let's change our type to y. Y equals sin x, cos x, tan x. I'm going to draw, and immediately I've got the wrong V window. Now the great thing about this is it will automatically put that correct V window on for me. And it's probably a way to do it on here, but I've just kind of preset windows, trigonometric, draw. And there we go. We've got a very, very similar layout from this one to this one. But you can see how far calculator screen technology has come in the last 30 years. I still think it's so impressive that you're able to do this. But that's not all this calculator can do. Oh no. Before we look at some of the cooler features of this calculator, I just want to have a look at some of the other presets. So if you can think of other types of graphs that you might have, if I press graph, we could have, if I just put squared, it just draws me the basic quadratic, y equals x squared, and it's at such a good scale as well. So it's not at the trigonometric scale, it's at the actual good place to view it so you can get a good idea of the shape. Let's say I wanted to draw a log graph. I can do that too. Look at that log graph. Can I draw a natural log graph? Of course I can. Why would you not be able to draw one? Lovely stuff. Can I draw a square root graph? No, I can't because I didn't press the square root button. There we go. Square root graph. Now the question is, can I draw higher powered polynomials, like the default polynomials? As you can see, I managed to figure it out, but obviously you can't just do the preset, if that makes sense. You actually have to put the x in. So there I put x cubed, and you can see it's drawn it on top of my natural log graph, and that's because I didn't use a preset that time. It was actually using an x and specifying that kind of stuff. What if I wanted to do some kind of more advanced polynomial? So if I do drop graph, and let's do, I want to do a quartic. Let's do x to the 4, so I'm going to do x to the 4 plus 4x, and then let's do 3 x cubed. Will that work? It has worked, and it's drawn me some very, very confusing shapes at the bottom there, if you can see. Because it's overlaid it on the other graphs as well, it's a little bit confusing. But that's really, really cool how on this calculator, like this is one of my most compact calculators, you can actually draw graphs and trace them and that kind of stuff. You can even change the range and stuff when drawing the graphs. So it's actually, in some ways, a lot more intuitive than this bad boy over here. But, obviously, that's cool. But there are just a couple things on this calculator which I do think are just cool. And for this, I'm actually going to get one of the more hated calculators, even more so than this fella over here. We've got the Casio fx-6300G CW. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to try and switch from degrees to radians, and or vice versa. I don't know. I think that they're all in radians, so we're going to go from radians to degrees. So on this one first, I'm going to have to go settings, calc settings, down, angle unit, and then select degree, and then did I select it correctly? Yes, I did. So you see that was a lot of keystrokes just to change from radians to degrees. This one is actually a lot better. I press settings, OK for radian, OK for degree, and then back. That's it. It's still not great because you have to go in the menu. This one, it's actually so clean. What we're going to do, I'm just going to move this out of the way. So you see mode here. I'm going to press mode, and then you have a look here, and forward for degree. You press 4, execute. You'll change to degrees. Look at that. Can you see? This is degrees now. It's got the little D for degrees. If I want to change back to radians, mode 5, enter. It's so easy and it's so quick. You don't have to go into a menu or anything. It's actually very, very cool. Now the last cool thing I want to have a look is something a little bit more unusual, and it doesn't apply to these scientific calculators, but it does apply to the more chunky ones like these ones. These can actually write programs. So this actually did have a little brother called the Casio fx-6300G, which actually looked identical, but it didn't have any programmable abilities. So what this one can do, if you're on the main run menu or whatever, you press mode and then you press 2 to write, you can see here, I think these are the different program locations that you can choose. So if I press 0, in here you can actually write some of your own programs, which is very, very cool. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to, I've got the manual here on the screen, and we're going to have a look at the programming over here. So obviously this is a little bit less intuitive than how programming is done in Python, for example, on this fella over here. But it's still very, very cool. So you can see on my screen we've got program, and you can repeat calculations on here. And what you can do, they've given an example. Find the surface area and volume of a regular octahedron with the length, where the length of one side is given. So you can actually type these formulae in there and save them to this calculator, so then you can use them later on, and it becomes a lot quicker. So what you can see, what we've just done, we've stored it in memory location 1, and then we can start writing. So what you do here is kind of like you ask the user for an input, you store it in A, and then what you do to the A value is you times it by 2 root 3, and then you square the A, and then you can output it, which I think is so incredibly cool. What I think this is actually very, very similar to is Casio Basic. So what I've got here is I've got my Casio fx-CD20, which I have not used in a while. Look how old it looks compared to the GraphMath Plus. Anyway, what we're going to do is we're going to go to not graph, we're going to go to program. And as you can see, I'm going to show you some programs that I wrote a while ago. And this basically does the same thing that this does, but a lot more, this one's a lot more primitive, obviously. But it still works in a very, very similar way. So if I go to, let's pick a acceleration mark. So what we have here, initial V, question mark, store that in V. I'll try and, sorry, get the reflection not in there. And then final V, store that in W, time, store that in T. And then I just have the formula here and output it, W minus V over T. Final minus initial velocity divided by time. All that's kind of added in this one that makes it a little bit more fancier is the text that you can display when doing different steps of your program. So for example, initial V, let's say I start at 0 meters per second, I end at 10, and that takes me 25 seconds to do, gives me my acceleration here. But I could easily write a very, very similar program on this one, and it would do exactly the same thing, just without all the bells and whistles. I can show you a couple more, like momentum, for example. And here we've got some if statements. This is where it gets a little bit more complicated compared to on here. I can't remember if this one can actually handle if statements, but that's fine. And then I just check what the unknown is and then solve for what the rest are. Very, very cool. But generally that is it for one of the coolest calculators in my collection. The Casio fx-6300G. And it's a really, really unique calculator because you don't expect something this thin, this small and this old to actually draw graphs really convincingly. And it's so easy as well, because this one, for example, what you got to do if you're on a home screen, you got home and then you got graph and table, you got to do okay, and then you got to find a free one, and then you got to type the expression, and then you got to do preset windows, make sure it's on the right one, draw. It's just a lot of faff. This one, if I wanted to draw a sine graph, sine, boom, it's right there. That's what I like about the older Casios, is that things sometimes just felt a little bit more integrated, not so much compartmentalized into apps, which I find are a bit, they're annoying to navigate sometimes and Casio tends to be a bit liberal of the use of apps and menus in their recent series of calculators, but that is a whole other video. But for now, I hope you enjoyed this little showcase of the Casio fx-6300G. If you did enjoy the video, then make sure comment below something nice, like the video. If you want to see more random content on this channel, some more calculators, we've got some Minecraft and stuff coming up. We have our album, or EP rather, conjectured EP coming this year hopefully. Then please subscribe to the channel, do all of the YouTubery stuff that YouTube people like to say, and I will see you next time in a previous video or whenever. Thanks for watching, guys. See you at some point. Goodbye.